extensive IT and networking experience in Asia, Australia, and New Zealand. Prior to Aruba, Mr. Jackson was the APAC Vice President for Force 10, where he was responsible for Force 10's Asia-Pacific business growing to nearly 20% of their global revenues. Sir was the Asia Vice President at Cisco Systems and EMC, and has held several leadership management roles for Microsoft, Sybase, and Cisco Systems in Australia and New Zealand. Mr. Jackson is a Bachelor of Applied Science in Electronics from the University of Melbourne, Australia. We welcome you, sir, to Communique 11.
Sir, we kindly request you to preside over the session.
Okay, great.
And this for the pointer.
Great, thanks. Good morning, everybody. How are you? Yes, it's still just morning. So I actually had a 25-minute speech, which has now been cut to 20 minutes. So I'm going to talk fast. My origins are Australia, so I can usually manage to talk fast. You, of course, know who Australia is. That's the country that loses to everybody in cricket. We just did beat Sri Lanka in Sri Lanka, which is fantastic. It's about the only thing we've done. Apologies to my Sri Lanka friend, wherever he is. To lose to Australia in your own country is a really bad thing to do. Okay, so I want to talk a little bit about more the access side and then what's happening in managed service opportunity with the telcos. And I'll tell you just very quickly a little bit about Aruba. I'm assuming some of you may or may not know who we are. What we do is we are entirely focused on secure wireless mobility. So between ourselves and Cisco, we have about 80% of the architecture and infrastructure that the service providers and the enterprise wireless LAN customers are deploying around the world. And obviously, as this whole move from cloud computing to mobile devices continues to explode as it will, then obviously the managed service opportunities for service providers, who are not just telcos, by the way. You have a lot of cloud computing service providers who don't come from telco origins. It's going to place an even more important demand, I think, on the telecommunications providers to actually generate good service provision to their customers. We are growing really, really well because the market's growing really, really well. I've got some very interesting statistics for you in a minute about what is actually happening. I'm sure everyone in this room has got at least one mobile device. We're in most of the social networking. They're actually running our wireless implementations, whether that's Twitter or Facebook, Google, Microsoft. They're all significant deployers internally through their networks of wireless, and that's what we do. 100% of our business is focused on that. And most of the largest stadium applications in the world we're also involved in. So what's happening in this perfect storm of convergence on the access layer? And my view of, and everybody's view really of this world is you have data and information sitting somewhere in a data center, and then you've got mobile users trying to get access to it. That's where we're going. That's actually not the world we've come from. We've come from a very port-centric world that we are most used to, and managing networks that way. So this is actually quite a significant change for everybody in the service provider world to enable managed service in a mobile world. All of the dramatic changes that have occurred, thanks to mainly to Apple, but also lots of other companies. About 80% of the Fortune 100 companies are now deploying iPads or iPhones or some mobile device in their organisation. There's a phenomenal growth in smartphones and in tablets. I'll actually show you the incredible Apple numbers in just a minute. But if you add them all together, 900 million predicted devices, up from 289 million in the next 2 years in smartphones. I think that's light. If you just look at what's happening even in the last 6 months, the growth rate is going even more strongly. And tablets are phenomenal. It just has really changed the way even executives think about why can't I use my wireless device sitting in a conference room or wherever I go, who may not have thought about secure mobility at all 12 to 18 months ago. Multimedia, the collaboration of social networks is just you guys coming out of universities and college today. You don't think about wired, you think about wireless. That's your world. It's not the world I grew up in, I can assure you. So there is a very, very significant change in terms of how we are going to have to enable this, because that's what customers expect. And virtual desktop, obviously also in the enterprise space, is a major, major implementation that's occurring everywhere. I thought you might, in case you haven't looked at it, this is the Apple numbers. Now, I'm an Apple user, but you have a look at their 9 months revenues in their current fiscal year is $28.5 billion for the quarter and $79 billion for the 9 months. And if you look at what they did the year before, it's $15.7 billion for the quarter and it's $44 billion. So they are nearly doubling their business. How does a company go from $64 billion in revenues in 1 year to over $100 billion the next year? That's what they're doing. They're at $79 billion, their last quarter is 28. If you just add 28 to 79, that tells you without any other growth in their last quarter, and they will grow in their last quarter, that's where they're going to get to. And look at the difference in the quantities and the numbers. 20 million iPhones in that quarter, that 1 quarter, which was 142% growth, 9 million iPads, which was 183% growth, and 3.9 million Macs. So are we talking about a mobile world or not? And I think the impact that individual company has had. Every time Apple gets up on stage, I feel like cheering, because they make such an awareness of the mobile world. And if you happen to be a crazy Apple stock owner over the last 12 months, you'd be very, very happy. And when you think about that company is nearly doubling its revenue on small, low-cost devices, essentially, it's a phenomenal story. And it typifies why we have to worry about managing mobile users. The opportunity for the managed service providers, of which the telcos should still be the dominant force, aside from all of the cloud computing providers, it is true that the telcos have the best access historically to information about individual customers. And even though there is an enormous challenge on OSS BSS, and I think it's true, this is not going to be an easy migration at all. This is probably going to be one of the most challenging things for the telcos to do, because it's so different from what the traditional OSS BSS has had to worry about. But in terms of the market opportunity, the emerging service model opportunities for a profitable set of services, this is indeed one of the most significant top-line opportunities for them if they can get it right. But they will have a lot of competition from other service providers. The mobile workforce is a tremendous business driver, you know, and what is happening that's attracting the cloud world, if you will, is the fact that outsourcing becomes very, very attractive. Lots and lots of places in the enterprise space don't have a lot of internal IT expertise, and it moves very quickly. They have to manage now a much more mobile workforce than they ever had to before, and managing that and integrating it is a very, very big challenge. So there is a real interest in talking to service providers to manage that for large enterprises. I can tell you in the country, in Australia for instance, of the top 50 companies in Australia, which is all of the banks, all of the insurance companies, of those 50, 47 of them have outsourced to either a telecommunications provider or an IBM or a Fujitsu. So the managed service opportunity is huge, including at the very top end of the enterprise town, let alone for us individual customers. There are an incredible number of examples already for managed service provider business going on in the world. We are involved with a lot of them, and you can see a large majority of those are telcos. In Asia Pacific, on the right side, there are engagements right now. China Mobile in China, who, by the way, have about 750 million subscribers, and this calendar year in China, China Mobile is deploying 850,000 access points around China. So is it a mobile world? It sure is. And what they are doing is not only hotspots for their own mobile customers, but managed service into the enterprise. They are going after very specific verticals like health and education in particular. You'll find a lot of colleges and universities will take a managed service from their service provider, and typically that will be the telco as they expand into this. How do I manage? How do I rate limit, crazy students at certain times of the day doing whatever they do on their mobile devices? All of that is possible now, and the service providers have a great opportunity to provide those solutions. NTT in Japan, FET in Taiwan, these are the big telcos. Telstra in Australia, PCCW in Hong Kong, Telecom Malaysia. There are active initiatives in all of those places right now for managed service opportunity. Because cloud-based mobility services really play well to a service provider and a telco. I think you'll find them also doing a lot of linkage with some of the cloud providers, but the fact is the on-ramps will be simple mobile devices, either indoor or managed indoor APs or outdoor access points. That is the method of the future. There will be a significant division. We have really typically three levels in a network: the core, in the distribution layer, the access layer. The distribution layer is very much going to be a part of history very, very soon, because you'll need access and you need core in the data centers. You don't really need distribution if you manage these multiple mobile devices well, which is, again, a challenge for the service providers. Mobile network management, campus wireless LANs for large enterprise, secure, being able to explain to people how you can have secure mobility now with remote connectivity. All of the key verticals in the enterprise space, with still the exception probably of the banks who remain very nervous about this, is possible now. It's not possible in the future, it's actually possible now. And compliance, PCI compliance in retail and compliance in defence. There are very, very high levels of security in defence that are now supportable in the mobile space. So what is really required from any service provider is effectively managing the wireless LAN, effectively managing the legacy LANs that are there. Location tracking is critical, and particularly in certain verticals in the enterprise space, particularly places like hospitals, places like the retail space. Knowing physically where a user is and what they're doing and being able to manage securely their access accordingly is a very critical part of the mobile world. Mobile device management. You'll see the existing ability to actually not only know who you are, but what your device is that you are coming into the network on. Again, that's doable now, it's not a future doable. And security remains a very, very critical part of the deployments. In the campus and wireless LAN space, there is already significant deployments in that area. Many of the larger enterprises, when they move into a new building, now do much more of a deployment with their service provider or with their own internal IT for a wireless infrastructure and less of a wired, because it's quicker to get up and going. The performance under 11N is now very, very significantly better than what it was in historical wireless deployments, and they give a lot more flexibility to their employee base, because typically now, when you walk out into the world, you very rarely walk into a company where you get given a specific desk and a specific chair and a specific office. That's not the way that most people are now deploying their own internal infrastructures, even within their large corporate enterprises. So it offers a lot of operational excellence and a lot of productivity for employees, which is again what the service providers can come and sell to enterprise, the top end of town. The secure connectivity. There is now the ability to enable mobility for any teleworker very securely in a mobile world. And that obviously increases the collaboration capabilities for that organisation and improves the kind of global consistency. One of the reasons you have companies like Microsoft, Google, etc., who have thousands of employees in hundreds of locations is the ability to enable that in a secure mobile world. That's what they want to provide their own employees with. And when you think about the fact that they not only have employees, but they have contractors, they have guests, they want to be able to manage different security access for those different kinds of users. So the new model for the managed service provider opportunities for the telcos and the outsourcers is a security that's user-based, that's global, that's not just a point solution that's sort of connected to a physical port or a physical location, but it is truly global and it is truly individual-based. Uniform security policies that can apply everywhere, that take care of all of the compliance requirements, irrespective of the level of compliance needed, and a lot less physical infrastructure in the network to do it. So, you know, this is a really, really significant change that's going on. I think this is more significant than the IP revolution that happened in the late 90s, which was a big change from the old traditional telco ATM world into the IP world, which now is pervasive everywhere. Context awareness is extremely key. So we not only have to be user aware in the mobile world, but also device aware and application aware, because it does matter who that person is and what they're physically doing, and physically where they are and what the device is, whether it's a PC or whether it's a mobile device, a mobile phone or a tablet. And being able to manage that and provide that through the network security is absolutely critical, and a feature that exists, which is why the service providers are so heavily pushing into managed service into the enterprise space. So you can allow a BlackBerry to have a certain access, you can allow an Apple iPhone to have a certain access, you can allow an individual user to have a different security access in terms of the data they can get at, whether they're on their PC or on their mobile phone. That level of comfort for a service provider is critical, and their ability to go and explain that to the end user is also critical. And you can, obviously, as I said earlier, you can rate limit for certain times in the day for certain groups of users, which is, of course, in a university campus, a very, very important feature to be able to provide. So some of the managed service provider opportunities in Asia, you know, you can apply it for the external world in those multiple retail locations and internally within the store for local compliance, for wireless access to with multiple SSIDs. So within the store, managing the inventory, checkout facilities, anywhere customer service, the internet cafes, and also for the service provider, the ability to do PCI scanning, secure enterprise wireless LAN capabilities, secure wired access, the interface into the access point into the physical network, and secure remote access. These are some of the features that are already in play in some of the solutions being provided to the retail vertical here in Asia. Some of the examples of that, all of the 7-Eleven stores in Taiwan are managed by Far East Home, the telecom provider. All of the Starbucks stores in Japan are managed by, and the infrastructure is owned, as not just managed, but owned and managed by NTT. So they provide all of the coverage and support for Starbucks. 7-Eleven stores in Japan. So what is happening with a lot of that is the service providers are able to provide the infrastructure, enable their mobile users to have free access into their network, but if you're another mobile user from another service provider, you have to go and buy a ticket, basically, at the 7-Eleven store to have free access to the internet. So this is a revenue generation stream that you're going to see a lot more of in terms of when you're in physical public locations. You'll find the same thing happening with malls. There'll be hotspot locations, but then the service providers are going to go and talk to the individual mall retailers to say, why don't you do a little bit of advertising? We can have push technology through to the mobile devices in that location. So there is going to be a plethora of push marketing that goes on in the public environments. High density wireless LAN areas, stadiums, amphitheatres, being able to provide guest access into those areas, which again enables the infrastructure owners to be able to access all of the information and allows you and me as somebody walking into the stadium to have internet access, but obviously just as a guest, and a simple authentication process to occur right there on the phone. Convention centres, dense Wi-Fi areas, obviously there's a very significant requirement for managing the bandwidth of that. Again, that's possible for the service providers now with the right architecture on their wireless space. And in the dense areas, of course, you've got tremendous challenges in managing the radio because you can manage the air, believe it or not. You can manage the air in terms of performance, fingerprinting to know who it is, and spectrum analysis to make sure that the performance and figure out where your access points need to go so that the performance in those locations is satisfactory. There's still a lot of work to do with some of the service providers who will see this as an opportunity, particularly to enable them to offload their data from their 3G so that their 3G voice performance improves and they're offloading the data into a Wi-Fi network as a 3G backhaul, particularly in some of these dense public environments. I mentioned the 7-Eleven store in Taiwan, 4,500 stores. Basically, the service provider, the telco, is managing all of that with a central located controller, managing from a software point of view all of the deployments in all of what's essentially a dedicated hotspot within the 7-Eleven stores. Hotspots is a significant advantage and challenge for the service provider. The problem they have is they have to choose to put it in there for free right at the moment. So their ability to market to owners of information or owners of stores is the next big challenge, I think, for them. Right at the moment, they believe it's necessary that they have the hotspot versus some of the other service providers, and you will find typically that you can get access in a public environment, but it's linked to your mobile phone. All right? I can't get onto the internet in public environments here because I don't have an India telephone number. Those things are going to change very significantly as time goes on. You can actually not be limited that way in some other countries already. You don't have to have a local mobile phone, but you do have to subscribe and you do have to get a time-based access into that network. So I think the telcos are going to have to spend a lot more time on making it easier and work with the owners of the stores who themselves will see some advantage to do some push technology back to us as individual customers. So the retail chains are well down this track already. Taiwan, Australia, Japan, Thailand. We have an example right here in India that I think will happen very, very shortly, which will be a significant number of retail stores for a particular organisation. Again, that'll be a managed service. Starbucks, Safeway, when you think of the retail space, they have no technology expertise in lots and lots of locations. And that tends to be true also in verticals like hospitals. So we're seeing a tremendous amount of initiative with the service providers in the hospital vertical market because location-based services there is becoming critical. The ability to know where a patient is, where a doctor is obviously a very, very significant service provision to those hospitals. And the performance also in terms of the size of the hospitals and the way they can have an effective managed service is already very significant. The university campus. Traditionally, the university campus has done a lot internally. Again, we're seeing a tremendous amount of choices being made by a number of the universities across Asia to actually work with their service provider to have a managed service provision into the university campus and enable the students to bring whatever device they like and enable them to have access and enable it to be managed. And of course the head office of all of the large enterprise customers, which is a massive opportunity and challenge for the telcos, who very typically have been traditional wired and fixed line and lease line providers of service to those customers. They don't want to lose the big bank. They don't want to lose the big insurance company. They want to be able to provide them with an additional managed service facility for their large enterprises as they move buildings and as they move locations. So in summary, I think all of us who've been in the network space for a while just are still figuring out how we can have this enablement of the mobile device world. It is exploding. It'll be interesting I'd like to figure out what kind of devices will we have 5 years from now. It's hard to imagine, because if you go back even 3 years to figure out we would be where we are now, I don't think any of us would have made that estimation in terms of the number of devices, the variability of the devices, and the demand for traffic from those devices, both from an individual point of view and from a large enterprise point of view. Performance and ease of management are the critical things that I think the service providers are, whilst they're doing their transformation of the OSS and the BSS, which is equally critical to know about the customer. Ease of management in that remote network is absolutely critical. The growth of the 11N standard in wireless has enabled a hell of a lot of this to be compacted into a much shorter space in time from original estimates. 11N has increased performance significantly, has increased manageability significantly, and therefore has supported a lot of the growth of mobile devices. And if you look at the number of options that you already have versus where we'll be in the next few years, this isn't going to stop. I think this storm is going to increase, and it does represent a tremendous opportunity for the telcos to take the next step in terms of being a more varied service provider than even traditionally being just the fixed line and wired service providers of the history. This is where the future is, and this is where the top line incremental opportunities are, I think, in the next 3 to 5 years for anybody in the service provision space. Thanks very much.
Thank you, sir, for such a thought-provoking session. I'm sure everyone has a lot of takeaway from your views about context-aware Wi-Fi, mobile compliance and security moving from the old to the new model, and the upcoming revenue challenges for service providers. Now, I would request my colleague to present sir with a memento as a gesture of our gratitude and appreciation.